Hello, hello. All right, we are back. So today we're going to be doing our normal, I guess, topic focused live stream. There was an article that I found being pretty damn critical of coding boot camps. Sounds kind of familiar. Sounds kind of like me. But I want to dive into it. I think this person, I barely skimmed it over. So I'm going to be reading it for the most part for the first time with you guys. I barely skimmed it over, but it felt like he was really trying to sell the self-taught path. So we're going to dive into that. We did this once with the Treehouse article. I think it's been a while since we brought up like any sort of articles, but I think this will be fun. So what's up, everyone? Hey, Mello, glad you're excited. Glad you're excited, King, as well. Yeah, feel free to put me in the background if you're just working. Actually, I wonder how many people tune in when they're working, when they should be working. Appreciate the viewers either way. Welcome back, Code Thing. I know you get a lot of, what do you think about insert some coding bootcamp, but seeing how you live stream with the CEO of New Camp, what do you think of their complete? I probably, so with the backend added, I most likely will dive into that. I want to give people time to graduate. I want to give people time to test their knowledge in the job search and try to find that job. I do plan on doing a review again of New Camp at some point this year, though. Hey, Nickel. How's it going? You have an interview. Nice. That's exciting, Noah. You have to let us know how it goes on Friday if you can stop by. Hey, Cheddar. Welcome back. If I had money, I would go to Bootcamp to redeem. Well, that's the whole point. It's like, well, of course, you know, a lot of people just don't have the money. And a lot of people don't want to get trapped into that ISA contract. I think some of it's ignorance. Some of it's you just hear like a, you know, ISA contracts get a bad reputation. But a lot of it's just, they're not, you just have to realize coding bootcamps just usually aren't going to be transparent about the gotchas in that contract. And you have to read all the legalese and understand it, which is also a tricky thing sometimes. It depends on how well that contract is laid out. But yeah, then you have the question, is a coding bootcamp even worth the money? Hey, Joshua. How's it going? Okay, going through the fundamental course of New Camp. All right, Mello. You have to let us know how it goes. All right, you guys about ready? I was studying CSS variables and saw you went live. Welcome, Barcelona. Why did this live stream get pushed out to so many people? Looks like it did. I think it's just the topic. I think that's all it is. All right, let's, what are you guys feeling? Lo-fi or synthwave today? I'm kind of feeling lo-fi. Let's go. No, I'm not. I'm not feeling lo-fi. I'm feeling synthwave, actually. Lo-fi. You guys want lo-fi? A lot of lo-fi. We could do lo-fi. If it puts me to sleep, I'm changing it. I'm just telling you that right now. Came for the synthwave, stay for the time. I like it. That's all right. Friday will probably be synthwave. Maybe it will. I don't know. We haven't done lo-fi in a while, so I don't mind doing it. Just make sure the sound is good. It's a little loud. That's better. In my opinion, you should kind of like be able to barely hear it. Just a little bit in the background, you know? Oh, now you guys are saying synthwave. Okay, now you can't switch it up on me. All right. Should you go the self-taught route or go the coding bootcamp route? So let's dive into this. Feel free to leave your comments in chat, what you think about it. I'll pause periodically, share my opinions. That's how we usually do these things. And then I'll kind of just read chat and we'll continue going. That's how we did the Treehouse one. It went really well. You guys ready? Take a sip of my green tea. Oh, this is going to get cold before the end of the live stream. I know it. Green tea is really good at boosting your metabolism. There's a lot of other good properties too. I just still don't like the taste of it. All right, let's dive in. All right, you can see my screen. We are good. Let's go. Coding boot camps won't make you a developer. Here's what will. Actually, I don't even know if this person is going to argue a computer science degree. I actually don't know. Hello, Taj. All right, so here we go. The headlines are hard to resist. Salaries for programmers are said to be soaring. Annual paychecks for AI experts are topping 1 million. Wide dream of winning the lottery when coding bootcamps are springing up with promises to teach everyone what they need to get a ticket on the gravy train. The good news is that schools and camps often deliver enough knowledge to turn some people into great programmers. The bad news is that the lessons alone are far from enough. Programming isn't a least resistance path to a more secure, better paying work-life balance job. It's a difficult occupation that not everyone is suited for. If it were easy, everyone could do it, and then it wouldn't be as valuable. I mean, not a lot of people want to hear that, but all true so far. All very true. The first steps are often seductively easy. You set one variable, call it salary to 50,000, then you type in salary equals salary times 10. Bingo, you're coding. It's an exciting rush, and that experience might lead you to believe that you can become a professional developer with just a few more months of learning. Oh, yep, agrees so far. The basic information is out there, and you don't even need to pay very much to get it. There are plenty of good courses on Coursera and Udemy. Some high-end schools such as MIT even provide their lectures for free. But before you jump into, and I would argue those are a little bit more limited, but before you jump into a boot camp that will steal your evenings and separate you from your hard-earned money, there are several caveats you need to consider. That's the focus for the initial sections of this article. And if you're still interested, the second part is filled with advice on how to make the best of it. There's also a lot of noise around the question, how do I become a coder? Instead of another list of things to do, you'll learn what not to do, which is equally important. I probably focus on what not to do pretty frequently as well. All right, well, this is pretty base so far. Pretty base. Earl Grey tea for the win. I had a weird reaction to that, but it helps you sleep, doesn't it? Hey, from New Mexico, Dion. How you doing? Boot camp's expensive AF, not worth it. It's the proactive folks who make it big. But it's true. No matter what you do. Hey, Nolan. How's it going? All right. Let's keep going. Much of the value comes from very specific knowledge. Basic programming skills are easy to find. Many kids learn quite a bit in high school, taking advanced placement computer science courses, but that's not what businesses need. Many of the real world jobs involve fixing, updating, and improving some pile of code written in a particular, somewhat obscure language. Perhaps it's an old version of Python or one of the languages that used to be popular, such as COBOL. The Python one I can buy. I would argue like what percent of jobs out there are you're going to be coding in COBOL. Okay. They're not paying for programming talent per se. They're paying for someone with specific knowledge, someone who, for instance, knows what not to do with ECMAScript 6, blah, to avoid crashing old browsers that 5% of customers still use. Oh, that is such a fun thing about developing for the browser. How I don't miss it. No bootcamp teaches these details. This is why many ads for programmers ask for years of experience with specific buzzwords. The bootcamp might do a great job teaching you how to code in a few months, but you'll still need to spend years learning the idiosyncrasies of particular languages. Yeah. But to get a job, no. So you could even argue like a computer science grad just still has so much to learn. So it'd be nice if you provided some context of like, how is this relevant? Of course, you're going to dive deeper no matter like which path you choose, even a computer science degree. You're probably going to have to, like, especially if you're getting into web development with a computer science degree, you're probably going to have to learn more relevant libraries and languages to be able to become a web developer. More context around that would be helpful. Boot camps and online classes may take only months to complete, but wisdom can take a lifetime to nurture. It's easy to learn about variables, loops, and other abstractions. Building up the instincts to deploy them correctly and effectively takes many years of experience. So maybe he's kind of getting at, like, a lot of coding boot camps sell this idea. Like, I've even heard people that like really believe that their coding boot camp has them like mastering a language, right? And sometimes it's about just calling out that BS marketing language of coding boot camps. But like coding boot camps don't even, well, maybe that's a more in-depth conversation. A lot of coding boot camps will word things like you're going to have a huge depth of knowledge coming out of this program with this language. And that actually can happen. But if it's like a 3-month coding boot camp, I would argue probably not. Maybe he's arguing more towards how coding boot camps are marketing themselves. But a lot of this it's still irrelevant, right? We're talking about even becoming a developer. So this almost just seems obvious. Of course, you're going to have to dive into this for like the next 10 years to like really get the ins and outs of your language, your framework, your stack. You'll probably pick up a couple different languages by then, but all right. Coding is often very frustrating. Sure, programmers' offices are warm, comfortable, and often filled with fun toys, but that's just to cover up unpleasant drudgery and the relentless grind. Okay, we'll talk about that in a second. If it was easy, everyone would do it. I repeat this often whenever I get frustrated. It's true. Yeah, everyone would become a developer. I mean, you think the market is oversaturated now. Imagine if it was even easier. Way more people would want to become a developer. Good luck finding that entry-level position, right? So it's okay to like understand and accept that it is really difficult. And that can tell you, that can reinforce like, hey, it's only been 3 months. You didn't build this masterpiece like you thought you were going to, and that's completely okay, right? That's normal. Keep going. It should be hard. It is difficult. I think way too many programmers, especially YouTubers, they sell this idea of, oh, you could do it. Everyone can do it. It's a huge transition, a way better career. You should definitely go for it. And like people want to hear that, right? It gets likes. It gets pushed in the algorithm. But are those like content creators and senior software engineers that are selling that idea, are they really doing you a service? Are they really looking out for you? Do they really understand your specific situation and your aptitude for this? Probably not. They just get a bunch of likes. You should be able to get a job at that. I already have half a CS degree and 6 years of programming experience, so I feel like a boot camp will just give me the practical skills I need to market myself to employers. If you have 6 years of experience, you should be able to get a job at that. I don't think Noah means professional experience. Yeah. Yeah, it's amazing at the amount of experience like you think you have coming out of a computer science degree that can equal like even like less than 6 months of what a coding bootcamp will teach you as well. It just depends on the type of job you're applying for as well. Self-taught people can get a job 3 to 6 months. No, that's bullshit. No, that is complete bullshit. 99% of people will never achieve that. That's an illusion that way too many people sell. All right, let's dive further into it. Okay, so offices are warm, comfortable, and often filled with fun toys, but that's just to cover up unpleasant drudgery. Relentless grind. I don't know about you guys, but screw the ping pong tables. I never cared about that crap. One thing I really did enjoy was them serving lunch daily at my first position. I really enjoyed that. That was awesome. I talked it out with my boss to give me a 2-hour lunch. I'd go work out, come back, eat that lunch. It'd be a tiny bit cold, but I didn't really care. Man, just like my day-to-day was just perfect at that first position. But I don't know, a lot of the toys and stuff like that. Yeah, it's like you get cozy couches, and you even get like some insane places that will have like sleeping pods and beds, and it's like that should be a huge red flag that they don't give a crap about your work-life balance. When I see toys and stuff like that, I don't know. I'm just not looking for that kind of thing. I think it attracts a younger audience. I think it does. And I think it sells the dream of what people usually perceive being a software engineer as being. And eventually people break out of that dream. They realize it's still a grind just like any other job. And they might really enjoy that job, but eventually those toys, they don't really have a whole lot of value a year into the position when you're every 2 weeks and then like you're at the end of a sprint, you're just trying to rush your feature out. It's like those toys become way less important once you start really getting your feet wet into this stuff. Programmers often describe their day-to-day in metaphors such as beating my head against a wall or wandering in the dark without a flashlight. The work involves negotiating a mental maze without a map. Okay. In the old days, programmers would joke that it's not as if the machines can talk and tell us what they need today. Although plenty of software libraries are available that help computers to vocalize words and even translate them into hundreds of languages, doesn't mean they're going to say anything that helps you debug them. Okay. In many cases, the computers are confused, often spouting distracting nonsense. After all, if you were running smoothly, no one would pay a programmer to fix. If they were running smoothly, no one would pay a programmer to fix them. I don't know. I think that's more of a lesson to really set up your environment correctly, and just learn ways to help you debug a little bit more effectively. I feel like that's just it's a weird thing to say. I don't think it has to be distracting nonsense. Maybe he's talking about like maybe initially when you're first becoming a developer can feel like that. But I think once you learn to read a lot of the debugging messages, a lot of it does make sense. I don't know if I agree with that. Critical thinking is probably the best first thing to learn when learning to code. Yeah. It's a skill you have to build up. I don't like the glorification of dev jobs, to be honest. And yeah, and that's the balance. See, like I probably piss off a lot of people. Like I call out both sides. It's like the over glorification and putting software engineering on a pedestal, like it leads to really mismanaged expectations. But also there are a lot of miserable programmers too that aren't holding themselves accountable for them being miserable. And kind of, you ever just like meet miserable people that kind of just want to spread this miserable message and make everyone else around them just as miserable. And if you're happier than them, they'll like bring you back down to their level, right? Isn't it really depressing to be around that person? And if you've never encountered it, maybe you just never met that person, but maybe you are that person as well, right? So there's this balance of like, you can actually really enjoy your coding job, but it's also a job, right? And I think we have to realize there's that balance, but I've definitely seen both extremes of the spectrum that I guess I knocked down. You've taken some of the recommendations to build projects and gotten better. That's awesome. Konichi. There are definitely, yeah, it sounds like you need to start building some JavaScript projects. A lot of people JavaScript's a weird, funky language to learn initially. I'll take a nap in my car. Yeah, we just don't need the beds. It's startup culture that sells that stuff. And sometimes you'll even see it with more corporate culture, and it's just funny. I'm telling you, like, it's enough to get you in the door, but that will not be valuable to you. You should care about your salary, equity into the company. And I would say arguably, especially with your initial position, equity is way less important. But you can argue like vacation days and, I want to work remote at least one day a week or something like that. There's so many videos of people on YouTube getting a job in 3 to 9 months, just starting from scratch. I don't think all of them are lying. So there are a limited number of developers even pushing out developer content. Like when I compare it with thousands of people that I've mentored, and just like I've talked to a lot of different engineers, I would say people that are getting a job self-taught within 6 months are probably like if I had to give it a percentage, it'd be like less than 0.1%. So I think it might feel like these YouTubers, they're plentiful, like, right? Like the people that do create these videos around it they might share their story, and I would even argue, like, once you dig into their story, they didn't tell the whole truth, and they went to like maybe a mini coding boot camp, or they did something extra. But even that, it's like, even if you have like 100 YouTubers that I guarantee you don't even have 100 YouTubers that have pushed out that content saying I got a job within 3 months, right? But like 100 out of like, I don't know, the 100,000 that's trying to become a developer, that percentage is extremely low, and it's misleading to say, oh yeah, YouTubers are sharing these stories. Like, it's completely it's misleading, and it's very disrespectful to even provide that advice towards aspiring developers, because you're not really being transparent and honest with them and providing the reality of what the average developer is going to take. You're always going to have exceptions. You're always going to have exceptions to the rule. But if it's like less than 0.1%, are you really doing people a service by saying, oh yeah, you can become a developer within 3 to 6 months? No, you're shooting them in the foot before they even start. And then they invest, they plan financially to become a developer with a self-taught path. And they only had so much savings because just because you heard like a few stories on YouTube, decided to give that advice to an aspiring developer that literally financially planned around that advice, around what you told them. You just screwed them over, right? So I think you need to be very careful. Like, if you really want to help people and you want to share that advice, get that data down. I better see like, 10,000 engineers and like a spreadsheet of you showing and you proving and you going through their LinkedIn, like even at the basics, going through their LinkedIn and saying, okay, yeah, this person did the self-taught path. They just did Treehouse or something like that. They got a job. You'd find that it's less than 0.1%. I'd say that, like, I would say that percentage is pretty damn accurate, because like the number of developers that even become developers in this self-taught path are very low as well. Some people get hired in 3 to 6 months if they network well. No, people get lucky, but it's not the majority. Still the sweet spot everyone talks about, though. Yeah, exactly. And I would argue it wouldn't be a sum. It would just be like a very few developers. Very extremely few developers that will ever achieve that with the self-taught path specifically. The self-taught path is hard. It is really hard. I mean, hey, we're going to be diving into the article. We'll see what this person says, but you have to understand like the effect of your message too. Like, you could give any advice you want. You can create any content, but I can tell you from experience, when I see that advice given out, it screws so many people over. And you might not ever hear about it. Like, you just shared it on LinkedIn. Yeah, you can get a job within 3 months as a developer. They might never even reach out to you. And they might have just screwed their entire financial situation up because of that advice that you gave. And so I'm telling you, that advice I've seen screw a lot of developers over. Take that, do what you want with that information. But that's why I'm like really pushing back. And I call that bullshit, because it's dishonest and disrespectful towards a lot of aspiring developers. It just screws way too many of them over. It's going well, Anthony. How are you doing? Yep, exactly, Joshua. It's like no one wants to talk about the hard path. They don't know YouTuber. Like, you see a YouTuber that talks about their hard path once they finally achieve something, but majority of people will not share that hard path. And most people that go down that hard path and have so much trouble with it and give up, they'll never share their story, right? You don't hear about those stories. How can you contrast that advice if you don't even hear about like majority of the negative stories? Hey, Hologram, welcome back. I don't believe in randomness with a job hunt, Michael. Yeah, everyone's gonna have a different path, but I also think randomness is bullshit. I think people have more control than they realize. I had this argument with the founder, or not the founder, as a director of Full Stack Academy Chicago campus. We had a long conversation. Maybe I should talk about that. I think more people are in control of their job search than they think they are. They just don't measure it. They don't know how to measure it. I would argue there's extremely little randomness in the job search. But to the extent that you are measuring the proper things to figure out like how you are progressing in the job search, how close you're getting. All right, we'll read a few more, and then I want to continue with the article. Good conversation. So far, recruiters and such seem more impressed with the self-taught thing than attending a coding boot camp. I think a lot more people are more impressed, and I found that I think that's even how I got my second position. Well, no, I did go to a coding boot camp, and I think they just appreciated like a non-traditional tech background. Survivorship bias. There's a lot of survivorship bias in developer advice in general. And if you want me to do any reviews, there's actually a link in the description where you could submit your review request. So if you want me to review a program, or if it's been a while since I've reviewed a program, there's a form link in the description of this video. Click on that, fill out the form. And that's how I'd make the suggestion. I'm just getting too many requests to do that. All right, cool. Let's dive further into it. Oh, yes. Bootcamp placement numbers can be misleading. I love it. Tech Beacon has previously conducted a review of coding bootcamps gathering about 24 programs. The findings showed that 17 of 24 programs claim that 90% or more of their students got full-time programming jobs or freelancing positions within 6 to 12 months of graduation, but those numbers could be misleading. Oh, really? Most of the job placement claims are largely unaudited. You don't say. Hack Reactor, Turing School, and Lighthouse Labs are among a few that report student outcomes. Course Report, a site that hosts reviews and resources for coding bootcamps, has conducted student surveys with over 1,000 respondents from many reputable in-person coding bootcamps for the past 3 years for its annual alumni outcomes and demographic studies. Most people will fill out that surveys that had a pretty good experience, just for your information, not a negative one. The 2014 report claimed that no more than 75% of coding bootcamp graduates gained employment as developers after graduation. In 2015, that number dropped to 66%. For 2016, it jumped back up to 73%. 2018, the latest year, which the report was completed, the number had hit 78%. Man, but we're seeing so many 90+% getting jobs. I wonder what's going on. Not all bootcamp attendees are starting from scratch. Some aren't there to get a developer job, and some students are already professional developers who are just trying to acquire new skills. While the study doesn't say who went from zero to developer, the surveys do cast doubt on many programs' 90% job placement claims. Just talked about it with App Academy. Majority of that student's cohort got kicked out of the program. Was that data included in their placement? In my experience, most coding bootcamps will not include that data. I think some would argue that's extremely misleading in their marketing. I don't know. I would have to verify it myself, but one way to really bump up that placement number is to not pass students. They're not qualified to get into that placement because they didn't finish the program. How are we going to know, like if they didn't even finish the program, does that accurately represent how well we prepare as software engineers? Yeah, but a lot of coding bootcamps don't think that. There are a lot of different ways that coding bootcamps will bump up those numbers. If you see 90%, you see anything above 90%, you call out that bullshit. You do not believe it. So far, I agree with most of this. It's actually a pretty good article. Oh my God, this article's huge. All right, I'll kind of touch on a few comments from chat and then we'll keep going. I think it's a great option for a lot of your community. Yeah, just request it. I've heard some negative things about it, but I haven't done an official review. Hey, Jeremy. Welcome back. How do you determine how truthful boot camps are with their placement numbers? A lot of ask the right questions to the admissions. There are different ways. I had a conversation with Vincent. You might even reach out to him specifically as well, but it's just being aware of these things and bringing it up and having them present that data and talking through the criteria that include students, that exclude students. You got to ask that admissions, and if they are dodgy, get any sort of feeling that they are dodgy and they're not being honest, that should be a red flag to you. You got to ask those questions though, Because they don't really just present all that data publicly. They present the data publicly that they want people to see. There aren't really good stats on how successful self-taught people are and how many quit. There's selection bias and everything. Yep, I'm telling you, there are a lot of people that quit that self-taught path. A lot, yeah, a lot. There just isn't a lot of data on that. You're right. Crazy way to sell their data to would-be students who are just getting kicked out for not focusing to click a button. That, I think that just triggered me. I'm like, I'm not gonna go off on a rant about that. That's one thing that triggered me in that episode. So let's keep going. Quality complaints are common. It's not hard to find a litany of bad coding bootcamp experiences online. You can find plenty of positive reviews as well on sites such as Course Report. Graduates cite several reasons for the happy reports. For one, they may not want to devalue something on which they spent so much time and money, and they don't want to get into a confrontation with the coding bootcamp provider by posting a negative review. I'm telling you, so many people are afraid of dealing with any sort of drama. I've had graduates reach out after different episodes. They're like, I just didn't want to speak up, right? I was afraid I wasn't going to get help with career services. I felt like even the students started kind of like dodging me a bit, or I just felt like, yeah, like I just wasn't getting any help afterwards, right? And a lot of people go to a coding bootcamp because they want to be in the network. They want to take advantage of what the coding bootcamp network provides, and they're scared of a negative review, understandably, getting them to be isolated. A good coding bootcamp will never do that, but a lot of coding bootcamps do that, and that's the realistic situation of it. Many of the negative reviews that do get posted are criticisms of individual instructors. Basil Frag, an iOS developer with experience as a bootcamp mentor, acknowledges that finding good teachers is hard. You don't get paid much, so you have to really love what you're doing. I don't know. I mean, with a couple of years of experience as a software engineer, you could argue for easily over 100K salary, but that might be relevant. Like, over 100K salary with 3 years of experience isn't a lot of money in New York City and Manhattan specifically. So I think it depends, you know? Although, okay, you don't get paid much, so you really have to love doing it. Although several schools have highly qualified, well-paid teachers, many coding bootcamps fill teaching assistant and mentor positions with less experienced developers, he said. Yep. The practice of bootcamps hiring their own graduates as mentors immediately after graduation is widespread, Parag said. Not only does that help to fill a shortage of teaching assistants, but it's also an easy way for coding bootcamps to improve job placement stats. Oh, I wonder if the stats of hiring a student as an instructor counts as them getting a tech job. I wonder. Another concern is that when working with inexperienced teachers who don't have a lot of time to spare, there's always a danger that your bootcamp experience could resemble this anonymous reviewer's story. A few of our teachers hadn't even been in tech longer than 2 years. You're lucky. There are coding bootcamps that will bring them right. They graduate, they're an instructor. You are lucky with this. They at least have 2 years of experience. Their teaching skills lacked, and they got increasingly frustrated when students didn't understand the material. Okay. Because of their lower pay, mentors don't get paid a lot. That can be a trap. Be careful. Because of their lower pay, mentors need to work at a second job or take on additional students. Yep, if they're paid on a per student basis, as they were in a bootcamp I attended. Cut this. Okay, think you forgot to edit that out. Mitch attended a bootcamp at the byline now as Peter. I don't know what he would say. This can cause some mentors to make themselves less available to students or to provide low quality feedback, as some online reviews claim. Okay, cool. So we'll dive into this, and then we'll pause. Be realistic about the length of training time you'll need. Bootcamp students who come into programs as beginners are not prepared for a development job when they graduate. I don't agree with that. That's a statement that's often made that I don't agree with. You are prepared for a developer job. You can get hired after a coding bootcamp. That's BS, but there are a lot of coding bootcamps where you're not going to really be prepared for a lot of jobs, right? And that's why for most coding bootcamps, the recommendation, like, spend a couple months like really diving into your personal projects and reinforcing everything that you just learned through implementation. but I don't agree with this statement. I never have. It's possible that you might qualify for a junior developer or internship. Well, that's a development job. What are you talking about? After graduating from one of the more rigorous... no, I don't agree with that. But it's going to be very hard to stand out from the increasing number of bootcamp graduates and thousands of computer science graduates. You can't truly... I would argue a lot of coding bootcamp grads stand out more versus the computer science graduates if the computer science grads kind of had like a very traditional archaic curriculum and they're trying to get into web development and they don't have applicable skills. It really depends. Like if a computer science graduate pairs what they're learning with relevant material, with relevant libraries, and keeps themselves up to date, they come out with a portfolio of their own, that's huge. They're going to be pretty damn qualified, but a lot of graduates don't. So it kind of depends. You can't truly become a developer in 3 to 6 months. You 100% agree with that. And again, there's an exception to the rule. We talked about that. There's always an exception to the rule. The problem comes when companies interview graduates and find that their programming skills aren't fundamentally sound, even though developer interviews have problems of their own. Farag said that a technical interviewer will eventually find out if you can't implement some of the most basic algorithms. True. Many coding bootcamps don't spend much time on algorithms, and many courses focus on learning tools rather than on... But I would argue that's probably a better case for front-end developers. And most people that go to coding bootcamps are aiming for a front-end position for a bunch of different reasons. One common one, they think it's easier to get into, which they might have a better support system and a better curriculum for front-end. There aren't a lot of great self-taught curriculums for back-end. I don't think they're not hiring qualified, or I think a lot of companies are willing to hire entry-level back-end developers, but I feel like a lot of the curriculums don't really prepare them for that type of position. And so a lot of people just assume it's way harder to get into back-end, start with front-end, go into back-end. I don't agree with that. I think you just got to spend a little extra time like really solidifying your skills. And I did like a self-taught video. I brought on a coworker of mine, and he laid it out really well of like how he would go down the self-taught path to teach himself how to become a back-end developer if he had to do it all over again. And it's doable. It's very doable. Even though developer interviews have problems of their own, Farag said that a technical interviewer will eventually find out if you can't implement some of the most... Okay, read that. Many courses focus on learning tools rather than on programming. Fair. Co-founder, CTO, Firehouse Project, Online Coding Bootcamp also sees this trend. The good coding bootcamps out there will cover CS topics around algorithms and data structures, but 9 out of 10 coding bootcamps won't cover those topics at all because these topics can be difficult. I don't think it's because they're difficult to teach. It's because they're seeing people being placed without teaching them. It's about developing the most efficient curriculum, right? And trying to do it in a shorter time. Coding bootcamps wouldn't continue to do this if placement numbers were like 20%, right? So I would argue there's some merit to not teaching it, especially front-end programs. But I do think it's helpful, and it can help you stand out. All right. View is particularly jaded as the title of his post makes clear. The dirty little secrets about the worst coding bootcamps out there. 9. Hey, we got another article to read for another live stream. All right. Many of the top coding bootcamps teach frameworks such as Ruby on Rails that favor convention over configuration. That is, students learn the usage conventions for a specific tool, but not the fundamentals of how web development actually works across tools and technologies. I would like him to elaborate on that a bit more. Convention over configuration. I wonder if configuration is the word I would use. These frameworks give students just enough knowledge to start building simple web apps. After getting a handful of projects under their belts, many graduates believe they are ready to enter the job market. Unfortunately, they still lack solid foundation. That's pretty true. But I do think there is value in starting with practical applications and building something with Ruby on Rails, and then diving back into the fundamentals, like learning a little fundamentals, building a really small project, then diving deeper into the fundamentals. Because I think a lot of programs, that really just will spend 3 months just focused on fundamentals alone. First of all, you have to implement those fundamentals if you want to reinforce them and really understand them and remember them, be able to recall them and apply them, right? Fundamentals are useless if you don't have some applicable experience, applicable implementation to use them with. They're useless, right? And so I think you need to really combine that with implementation. Sometimes that means building out a small project. But I think it's a combination. All right, we'll pause here. What do you guys think so far? Noah, okay, Brain Station was trying to be more accurate with their stats. I mean, seriously, kudos to them. That's awesome. There are so many bad entry-level devs that they're making real hard for the few entry-level devs that are good. Yep. I'm telling you, there are a lot of things that make hiring managers a little bit more skeptical of hiring entry-level. It's a huge reason why companies, it's like, are kind of assuming like a lot of entry-level developers that are being spit out from these coding boot camps just can't do the job, right? And that's why you even get some bias against coding boot camps and even against self-taught programs, especially when self-taught developers are presenting tons of templated projects where it was like a tutorial-based project. They didn't really build it on their own. Can they even do the job, right? A lot of hiring managers, I mean, for good reason. If I had 10 people come out of like Full Stack Academy, for example, the coding bootcamp I went to, and they all like, I remember my, one of my old boss, he's like, I had a bad experience with a coding bootcamp grad who didn't even know a for loop. He said he graduated a coding bootcamp. He didn't even know a for loop in JavaScript. And like, imagine experiencing that from a coding bootcamp, you know, like 10 students that come out. It's like, you're going to stop even bringing people in that graduate at coding bootcamp. You're going to rightfully assume that coding bootcamp isn't preparing students well enough for the market. And that happens. That happens with self-taught too, that present tons of tutorial-based projects. And you're just, you know, you're trying to do the best that you can and present the best projects that you can. But, you know, you have to realize, I'm telling you, hiring managers, when they're hiring for a position, they still have other responsibilities. They have tons of other responsibilities. And this is so much extra work for them. They're trying to. It takes a long time to hire an engineer. And, you know, it takes a lot of time. A lot of time goes into it. And, you know, a hiring manager is going to very quickly try to weed out as many people as possible for good reason. It's a good perspective to have, but you're right about that. Some coding bootcamps are too fast paced, and how then they spread their students. Many students who make it do so because they spent a lot on it and had more motivation than the self-taught. Okay. Most companies do not want to hire junior devs. They want pre-trained mid-level devs. There are no pre-trained mid-level devs. It's not a thing. It's the entry-level developer is the standards have just gone up because the market is so oversaturated. You're still an entry-level developer. There's no such thing as pre-training mid-level developers unless they have previous programming experience, like real professional experience. A lot of people assume like companies just want to hire mid-level developers. It's like, no. There's been a huge, massive transition of people trying to become a software engineer, and the standards have gone up. That's what happens when you have way more entry-level developers that are applying for positions that are what are available. Like, that's always going to go up. You're always going to, well, you're usually going to have like hundreds of people that apply for that same level entry-level position. The standards have gone up now. It's not a mid-level position, and that's where a lot of coding bootcamps will misrepresent the types of students they produce. But I'm telling you, companies don't want mid-level developers. It's just all these graduates being pushed out has pushed up the standards. It's still entry level, but this is what happens when people just want to dive heavily into this profession, and you have a lot of unrealistic expectations of anyone can become a developer. And I think this person even touched on this idea of like everyone should become a developer. Like he touched on it in the beginning, but I remember skimming through and he talked about it more, and I want to get to that part too. A lot of good questions. If I skip your question, we'll be doing a live Q&A on Friday, 1:30 Central Time. Just bring it up then. I just want to make sure that we're making progress on this because this is a pretty damn big article. I want to see if I can finish this. How do you not know a for loop? I mean, for loops are kind of tricky. I don't know about you. I think I struggled with a for loop initially. But sometimes it's like, do you really need a for loop to build a landing page? Probably not. Maybe, you know, it goes back to what he's talking about. It's just like building some application without like really understanding the fundamental. It happens. There are people that will graduate that really don't understand those fundamentals well. We hired someone from a coding bootcamp and didn't even know how to write an if statement. If only did a take-home test and not a live coding test, that's on us. Yeah, take-home tests really don't catch those sort of things unless you have them walk through the implementation. So I see a lot of employers do that. You can kind of catch people on that. The worst that can happen is I embarrass myself and think about it every day for literally 10. Don't do that, Luke. No reason to be embarrassed. I think boot camps are a great tool for those who are struggling with self-taught or want to network. Okay. I think the biggest issue that everyone wants to become a front-end dev. Every single self-taught guy wants to learn web dev. Please find a niche and do it. Don't be, yes, niche down. Yes, yes, yes. 100% agree with that. Time to learn COBOL. What about everyone can learn versus anyone can learn? I feel like anyone with tenacity, discipline, and patience can learn how to code. I personally think it's about mentality. Do you agree? Yeah. And it's about enjoying it. It's not just like you can have the aptitude for it, but not enjoy it as well. And you need that enjoyment. You need to enjoy coding. I'm telling you, you cannot hate coding and get a job. Of course, there are exceptions to the rule, and someone will bring up some random case of like a YouTuber saying, I hated coding. I just wanted to do it for the money and I got a job. You could do it too. There's always an exception to the rule. There's always someone in my chat that will bring it up. But I'm telling you, you have to learn to enjoy coding. That's going to get you to that finish line of getting that position. All right, Bootcamp. Oh my God, I didn't even read the title when I was talking about this. Bootcamp grads have flooded the market. It's surprisingly hard to stand out today's junior developer job market because, according to the Coding Bootcamp market sizing report, low-skilled developers continue to flood into the job market. According to the 2019 report, the number of Bootcamp grads went from over 15,000 to 23,000 year over year. There was a huge transition in 2020 and 2021. Yeah, these numbers are probably very low compared to that. I would be interested in checking out those numbers. With so many new coding bootcamps and so many coding bootcamp grads hitting the job market over the past couple of years, finding a job as a junior software engineer in the Bay Area is not as easy as it once was. True. A few years ago, boot camps took off when entrepreneurs saw a shortage of developers as an opportunity. They thought they could close the gap by creating a coding business, which could train anybody in basic development skills. But professional developers, even junior ones, need experience in many different aspects of programming to be effective software engineering professionals. Well, it's unclear whether the coding bootcamp significantly helped alleviate the developer shortage in the job market. Hiring managers aren't as impressed by bootcamps as they once were. True. You dropped everything in your life and dedicated 3 months straight to learning how to code. That's amazing. You won't hear those kind of words of praise anymore, except maybe from your mother. Oh, I like this guy. He said some developers even worry that a stigma is attached to coding bootcamp graduates, marking them as sloppy coders. Yep. Not everyone needs to learn to code. Soon after the learn to code movement arrived in 2012, the don't learn to code movement followed. The backlash from bloggers such as Jeff Atwood and Uncle Bob Martin. Uncle Bob might have seemed mean-spirited, but some complaints about the programming profession raised legitimate concerns. John Kowalski, a user experience engineer at CrowdStrike, said programming isn't an inviting field because even the most mature technologies have been roughly cobbled together over the years, and developers often spend much of their time hacking through libraries. Oh yes, that were never meant to be used together. Yep. Maybe in 10 years, he said, developers will have tools and platforms that work more elegantly and are easier to... I think it's going to get... It depends on your stack. If you're going down the JavaScript route, it's going to be messy forever. I can't see that ever getting easier. In fact, like a lot of front-end positions had higher requirements because like you're putting... like you could do a lot with JavaScript with front-end frameworks now. And so... you're even seeing some business logic that's being implemented on the front end, much more so than like 5-7 years ago. So, man, but JavaScript, I think JavaScript, if you keep up with the technologies, it's just one of those stacks that's going to pay very well. But it's still a lot of people learning JavaScript, right? It's not necessarily like a very in-depth specialty, but it takes a lot to keep up with. So it's not like insane salaries, but it's pretty good salaries. Mike Hadlow, a freelance C-sharp developer with more than 20 years of software development experience, points out that development is harder than people think. It's one of the few highly skilled occupations that require no professional certification, although some believe it should. And it might just be the only highly skilled job where other workers in the industry give copious amounts of their free time and energy to help train people off the street. And still, there's a huge mentoring gap. Yes. Yes, 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 yes. That free entry is both good and bad because, as Martin, clean code industry usually doesn't benefit from hordes of novices, but instead needs carefully trained individuals. He compares good developer training to flight school, adding that not many boot camps are that intense or require as many hours of training. Despite these voices of caution, some foresee a blue-collar coding revolution on the horizon, while others predictably scoff at this idea, much like the learn-to-code critics. There are many valid arguments on both sides, but Atwood, the co-founder of Stack Overflow, perhaps sums it up best. While I love programming, it's an egalitarian field. I probably butchered that word. Egalitarian, that's how you pronounce it. Field where degrees and certifications are irrelevant. In the face of experience, you still got to put in 10,000 hours like the rest of us. Okay. I don't know. This author is pretty based so far. Pretty based. Everyone trying to become a dev, even people that already have solid careers in accounting or engineering. It's true. Does it make sense to try to self-teach mobile development? I want to bring on a mobile developer engineer. I'm going to follow up with them. I think they just got done moving or whatever. But hopefully I can bring on a mobile developer that will be able to provide some advice for aspiring mobile developers. Any big self-taught projects that will make you stand out? I did like a huge live stream about how to come up with a project. I would check that out. Okay, is it like I need to write down the commands that I set up with my bot because I have that video. I wonder if you could do this. Hold on, commands. I don't know, my bots don't listen to me. But there is a live stream I did about how to come up with the project ideas. I've done a few. I've even brought on like a product manager and UX expert to talk about that as well. Nightbot, I'm not talking to you. I'm not talking to you, Nightbot. I was talking to Streamlabs bot, Cloudbot, I think they call it. The stigma is the reason I abandoned the idea of a coding bootcamp. Couldn't sort out the good bootcamps from the scams. Yeah, it's tough. It really is difficult. And there is an argument to be made about like where I'm wrong, right? I'm very, very critical of coding bootcamps, but you have to understand I'm critical so you are equipped with the right questions to ask admissions. That's the whole point of me being critical. It's not to say this coding bootcamp isn't for anyone, right? I truly believe every coding bootcamp will really be a good fit for someone, but it's to get past the marketing fluff and make sure you are equipped with the hard-hitting questions. And I'm telling you, it's so telling when you really challenge these admissions, these admission advisors, whatever their official title is called, with these hard-hitting questions. And you say, you know, I looked at, you know, your 90% percentage, but you don't really mention the criteria that excludes students from data. I heard like from Don's podcast, like 80 people dropped out of the cohort. Did you include that data? Don't you think you're a little bit responsible for those students dropping out, right? Don't you think that should be included in the data? And like you can ask, don't do it in that smart ass tone that I just did, right? But ask those hard hitting questions. And if I'm telling you, it's very telling when admissions can't handle stuff like that. They get defensive, they get dodgy. It's okay. Like, but also like if a admission says, yeah, you know, we're actually really struggling with this part of the program, or like our React portion, I'm going to be honest with you. I really wish we would implement like function-based components. We haven't gotten there yet, right? But you can learn a pretty good foundation. We're going to teach you classes in the prototype chain, and you'll be able to implement class-based components. And once you implement class-based components, you'll be able to pretty easily pick up function-based components, right? But like admitting that hole in their curriculum isn't a bad thing. And when people hear that, they're like, oh no, their curriculum's not up to date. I'm telling you, the curriculum It's not like there are so many different curriculums out there. That's not the part you should be incredibly critical about. It's about like the experience of the instructors, how they teach. Are you supported as a student, given your specific situation, getting an accurate representation of the chance of you as an average student being able to complete that program? What is that accurate percentage? Stop lying. I don't care about this like marketing percentage that is from like 2019, right? It's digging into that. So it's okay. Like when you have admissions that are admitting to holes or errors in the program, don't shy away from that. That's not what should throw up a red flag in your head. It's the dishonesty. You can't trust anything else in the program if you feel like they're being dishonest, if you feel like they're not being a person of their word. That should throw up a red flag immediately. And that's why I'm so critical of these programs. But on the flip side, I'm super critical of these programs, but also, you know, a lot of people will get tripped up when a coding bootcamp could have been an option, and they get so overwhelmed. They're like, all coding bootcamps are a scam, which isn't true as well. So if I give off that impression, which I try to combat that, but if I give off that impression, it's not true. You might have to spend a little extra time trying to find the right program, because some people will just, they'll say, screw it, I'm not going to a coding bootcamp, even though their financial situation set them up for it. They're just like, you know, too many of these coding bootcamps feel like scams. But yeah, so don't like just shun or block off the idea of going to a coding bootcamp, because it is a viable option. It really is a viable option. And sometimes like even bad coding bootcamps will get you like 80% of the way there. And then you can supplement. A lot of people that come out of a coding bootcamp, they finally know what they're supposed to learn. They might just have to spend a few extra months learning that and reinforcing that. That's also something to keep in mind. Coding bootcamp fees are effective at motivating people. Yeah, that can be a motivation. Well, the low barrier it takes to watch beginner web development videos on YouTube and feel like a dev doesn't hold the same repercussions. Yeah, you're right about that. And a lot of people will just bite the bullet because they want that fire under their butt. Now, make sure that fire isn't engulfing you. That's a problem I see among some grads. They're not good financial planners. A lot of people have poor financial planning skills, including me, like going into this business, and I gotta meet with my tax advisor soon. Just managing finance in general, we're just not taught that in traditional education. Our traditional education, our high school, does such a poor job at preparing us for the world, and they expect college to do it, and then college doesn't even do it. I don't know, that's a rant I can get into, but yeah, bootcamp ads forge on poor people who don't know what to do with themselves. I'd have to see the ads. Do I teach? No. I would love to. I actually would love to create a course. I don't know if it'd be free. I don't know if it'd be paid. But I would love to just like create a curriculum and teach and mentor and like do technical mentorship. The problem is I'm at a point with my content where like if I pivot, I'm not at a financial point where I can pivot. Like creating a course and doing that and going that route is just, it'll take a while to build up. I would love to just create a curriculum. Even if it's just like doing like hopping on live stream and like walking through small projects. I think that'd be fun on YouTube. Witness dishonest marketing with Practicum by Yandex. They stated the program prices increased, but I went back to check and they changed the date to 4/17. Blew my mind. It's like, sorry to hear that. Yeah. Popular media and bootcamps marketing sounds like there isn't any other profession, any jobs, only IT. I mean, yeah, that's true. That's true. But you're probably getting those ads if you are interested in technology in general. I do not care what the market says. I'm still going to keep learning. I'm all in. Awesome, Rain. All right. Side projects are considered as experience in coding or experience as being in a... No, not the same experience as being in a dev job. It's coding experience, but it's not professional experience. But that's the experience that you do put. Like, that's what employers want to see. What personal projects have you built? All right. Let's dive into it. Ask yourself, are you cut out for coding? Ooh, this is going to be a good one. You felt that first sip of power that programming gives you. You finish your first program, then all of the syntax starts to make sense after you build a few more and perhaps complete a course on Code Academy or Coursera. At that moment, you think, I could do this for a living. But at this stage of the game, you still have no idea what you're doing. You haven't stayed up until 2 a.m. 3 nights in a row trying to fix a bug or solve it. Well, maybe you shouldn't do that anyways. Don't be this developer. I think a lot of developers have this like survivorship bias of like, oh my God, yeah, I couldn't sleep, so I just got up and I solved this problem, right? And like, I'm telling you, a lot of developers are really unhealthy. Like, they're really unhealthy and they have a bad work-life balance. Don't be this developer. And a lot of developers try to normalize this type of thing. You don't have to. You don't have to do this crap. I think this is completely misleading. You haven't had to spend a whole day sorting out version control issues and getting stuck, going down multiple rabbit holes. You haven't had your app stop working, even though you're sure that you didn't change anything. True. You need an extreme level. That's the most frustrating part. Like, your app worked the previous day. You wake up, you launch your app, and it's not working. You're like, I didn't even add any code. What the hell is going on? Yeah, those bugs are fun to figure out. You need an extreme level of commitment and patience to work all the way up to an entry-level developer position and exponentially more for the rest of your career. True, but I don't think it's going to feel as hard. Growing as a software engineer through professional experience, it is harder, but it doesn't feel as hard. And usually now you're at a company, now you have the support of a company, now you have the support of your team, right? You can get more mentorship. And as you're in the industry, hopefully you're, making connections, and the whole process does feel easier in terms of growing as a software engineer, but it is exponentially harder. You just don't realize it. It was and is that persistence that allows me to stay in this field. Going in, bootcamp students may not realize that computer science is a low success educational field, and there's plenty of evidence showing that even college level computer science programs don't have stellar graduation rates. You don't say, but I thought they were all the ones getting the jobs. Between 30 and 60% of first year students in university computer science departments fail their first programming course. So why would anyone expect boot camps to be significantly more successful? Well, because usually coding boot camps will do a better job at weeding out people that have the right aptitude, but not all coding boot camps will do that. That's why. What's more, developers who get computer science degrees say they are largely self-taught, according to 2016 Stack Overflow developer survey. Even computer science departments can't keep up with the rate of change in the industry. Developers can never stop learning. Need any more discouragement? A 2020, yeah, damn. 2021 survey of over 83,000 developers on Stack Overflow revealed that more than half of respondents wrote their first line of code between the ages of 11 and 17. I think that just shows interest in it. I don't think that shows like preparation for coding. And a lot of developers that say this, like, they built something like really tiny, didn't really learn much, right? They were just experimenting. So I think if the author is using this to represent like all these other developers, they're better prepared than you, no. But if he's just trying to say like they were interested in it initially, then okay. It's still possible to become a programmer in your early 20s. Of course, it's just a lot harder when most of your time is spent working to support yourself. True. From these stats, you can see that bad practices aren't the only reason coding bootcamps are failing to take many people from zero to developer in just a few months. Programming is fundamentally hard, and people who are considering these bootcamps should be honest with themselves as to their level of commitment to programming. Software engineering is not an easy way to get rich. Oh my God. I should put this in my about section on YouTube. This line, damn, software engineering is not an easy way to get rich quick. Damn. If you really want to find out if software development is the right career path for you, ask yourself these questions. Am I willing to work hard for just the 3 months it takes to complete a bootcamp, or for the rest of my life? Yep. Am I able to get unstuck on problems without the help of a mentor? Am I motivated enough to never give up on these problems? Yep. Am I willing to give a lot of my leisure time in the early years of self-teaching? Yep. You'd be surprised at how many people that became developers sacrificed. That's all I did for like 2 years. That's all I did. I didn't even go on dates back then. I worked out and I was in much better shape, but like, man, I would argue a lot of developers that like finally became developers, they sacrificed a lot more than you realize. You don't really hear about stories like that. Am I willing to keep learning and coding even outside of normal work hours once I have a coding job? That's a big one. People argue against it, but I think that's a very, very important one because you can easily become stagnant and disinterested, burned out when you're not building your own stuff. Do I want to adopt programming as one of my main hobbies? If you say yes to all the above, then you should be able to surmount the obstacles to becoming a developer with or without the help of a boot camp. You also won't fall flat as many students do after attending a boot camp because the class was the only thing pushing you to keep working. I mean, yeah, that's pretty good. I agree with all that. It's pretty based. Damn, it's been over an hour. We've been at this for an hour. A lot of good stuff here. Hold on. Damn, that's a lot to read. I might like touch on a few things from chat, then keep reading because I do want to finish this. We're gonna go over today, but I need a quick bathroom break. Feel free to take a bathroom break yourself. Give me a few minutes. I will be right back, and then we'll keep going. All right, I am back. Yep, I know it's tough and market is saturated, but I discovered that I like coding, so I'm gonna keep learning. Good for you, Dracarius. Keep seeing Coursera commercials pushing dev as a career in 6 months. Now I have my dream job. I hate advertisements at this point. I just hate them. I couldn't figure out this issue, so I thought my brain with even less sleep could solve it. I haven't slept in the last 18 hours. Oh my god, that's good. Rest is key, true. Problem is, people think they will get a dev jobs right after coding bootcamp graduate, and it's not their fault because unfortunately that's how all these that's how coding. I mean, and that's the thing. When I talk about this, like I'll make fun of like these dreams of like, yeah, you'll get a job 3-6 months, or like get a job right after coding bootcamp. I'm not making fun of the students when I do that. I want to be very clear. It's like I understand they're being sold a lot of BS. I'm making fun of the people selling them that BS. A lot of coding bootcamps market that. A lot do. I wonder if regulations will ever be placed. Nah. How? I mean, you do get it in some states, but I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I don't think... I don't know. That's a good question. I don't think so. All right, let's dive in. Do-it-yourself boot camp. 7 things you should do and 2 things you shouldn't. Plenty of people have nothing but good things to say about their bootcamp experiences. Some landed jobs a few months after completion, but with a little extra time and more awareness of the resources at their disposal, those people probably could have succeeded without investing thousands of dollars in a coding bootcamp. True. Documentation for all the open source tools, languages, and frameworks that bootcamps teach are available online. There are countless free online tutorials on just about any development technology that bootcamps will teach you. I mean, there's no free program that I've ever found that will get you all the way there, though. And there are a lot of bad curriculums. And there's there a lot of the free programs don't do a good enough job of like really emphasizing they need to pair that project work of their own. All you need to do is pick a technology and run a Google search. The learning path may not be as streamlined as a bootcamp, but you'll learn more about the real life of a coder by wading into the swamp of documentation. Finding something to code. It's understandable to want a better paying job, but money isn't the best motivator when you've been staring at a screen for 12 hours and you still have no clue why the code won't work. Yep. Finding a goal helps. It's okay if you don't know what you want to code at first. When you're in the initial exploratory phase of discovering if you enjoy the basics, you need some time to learn what's possible and to generate ideas for exciting projects. Obviously, you'll want to try creating things that grow your knowledge, even if those projects don't produce an end product that sparks joy. But treat those assignments as stepping stones toward building more intriguing projects so that you maintain your motivation in those instances as well. Building something that would improve your life, that's a big one. It's a good project idea. Something you wish existed or something related to your current job or areas of interest. Want to build a game? Figure out how to do that. Enjoy music? Try to build a Spotify feature you always wanted. Yeah. Do you like to follow certain topics online? Build a web scraper. You wish you could automate some tedious tasks of your job? Watch automate the boring stuff with Python. Doesn't matter what it is, just code things that you want so badly that you'll keep grinding through those bugs and maybe even learn to love the countless hours of research. Doing otherwise, reversal of priorities. As a student of programming, you should take some advice from someone who wasn't an amazing programmer, yes, but was an amazing experienced designer. Start with the customer, experience, and work backwards for the technology. That's really good advice. A lot of developers won't give advice like that. But yeah, for the personal coding projects, the customer is you. Figure out what you want to create and then research which languages and tools would be good options for making that thing. Yeah, I think the author has a good idea of what motivates and keeps developers motivated. I think they have a good sense of that. They have the finger on their pulse, their finger on the pulse. That's what I was trying to say. I think the author has really thought about motivation. I agree with all that. Be open to many languages. You've spent a lot of time reading articles with titles along the lines of what programming languages should I learn? You're doing this wrong. Most of the languages are pretty similar and the differences are often stylistic. So choose a good language that's both powerful and not too complicated. Python is a common early choice because the syntax is not too arcane. That's made it popular with scientists and others who often need to write a short program to clean up data or automate some chore. The best way to learn how computer languages work, though, is to learn a second or third. You don't need to learn them all well, but being able to compare and contrast their structure and syntax will teach you more about how languages work. So I think this article is targeted towards entry-level developers. So with that context, I'm going to completely disagree with this, and I see way too many people spread themselves too thin. I actually want to go against this idea of like you should learn a language I do feel like this author favors Python. Python has been mentioned quite a few times, I think, in this article, at least from what I remember. But I think a lot of people spread themselves way too thin. Pick a single backend language. And that backend language, I would argue, shouldn't be learned. Like, if you're trying to get a job, that backend language shouldn't be learned on the basis of, like, it's, a good starting programming language. I think it's really healthy to look at your local big city. What are companies hiring for? If they're not hiring for Python positions, like I haven't even mastered JavaScript, and like you're going to make the argument like that you can learn multiple languages with the goal of like getting a position. I doubt it. Most people that branch off like that, they really struggle with depth in any single backend language. I would argue specialize, focus on a single language, and get that based on what's marketable in your local area, in your closest big city even. Unless you have tons of extra months to dump into, because you're not just learning that language, you're also like, you probably want to build something with it, something to implement. You're probably going to have to pick up a framework or learn the conventions of common frameworks in that language to be able to build some application that you're going to present on your portfolio. I think this is a really good thing to do once you get into the industry, and I don't think it's worth your time to do this before. I think people make a huge mistake with that. Coding bootcamps make a huge mistake with that. And coding bootcamps that claim to teach all these backend languages, like, I'm telling you, when I push, I can really tell this with JavaScript specifically, where like it's kind of a JavaScript focused program, but then they jumped into Ruby or they jumped into Python as well. It's like, then they don't really know JavaScript. I want to see more coding boot camps that promote this idea of, okay, we're going to teach you multiple backend languages to make you more marketable and see at least some depth and understanding of JavaScript. Like if they paired it with JavaScript, but they just don't have it. Like my perspective of just focus on one backend language comes from seeing all these coding bootcamp graduates that just really don't know any language. So if you have tons of extra months to supplement, that can be helpful. But I think it's bad advice for people that are initially getting into it. Now, there's something to be said with like, okay, you know, there are a few marketable languages in my local area. I kind of want to try Python. Okay, trying Python. I want to become a web developer. Man, do I hate Django, right? I just spent a week with Django. It's like this web development is like this the kind of framework I want to work with. Let's check out a couple other frameworks and see how like maybe like the JavaScript stack does or the Ruby stack does, right? I feel like that kind of exploratory stage should happen in the beginning. So the only way I would ever agree with this is just spend a little bit of time with a couple different languages in the beginning, potentially try to build something with it. But you have to understand that's going to definitely put months on your how long it takes to get that developer position to find what you really enjoy. Because I also think working with the stack that allows you to build what you want to build is going to be a huge motivating factor of you reaching that finish line. So I think people like this advice, usually I wouldn't do this. I wouldn't recommend it. I would only recommend it to someone that's already in the industry. I think you've got to be careful about this advice. I've just seen too many people that just don't get hired because they really don't understand their primary language. My opinion, if you can make it in Bootcamp, you can probably make it with some discipline and accountability. Yeah, you have to realize a lot of people that go down the self-taught path fail. A lot of people fail, and why is that? You need to be able to answer that question. And I think people have this assumption, well, you know, if you can be successful in a coding bootcamp, you can do the self-taught route too. No, there's a lot more variables that are involved in that as well. But so you're right, like with self-discipline and accountability, yeah, but like what's that mean? Break that down. Like how does that translate into your actual habits? What bad habits are going to prevent you from being successful in the self-taught path? So a lot of people say they have like good self-discipline and accountability and like self-accountability. It's like, then when you dig into their situation, they really don't, right? And so it's like, do you actually have that? Or do you just think you do? And the self-taught path will challenge that 100%. I think the big difference that people that go bootcamp self-taught is the time. If you go to a bootcamp, it's easy to assume you have money and time the most valuable thing. No, self-taught path is you better have a lot of time. You better have a lot of time. I think you're talking about like full-time immersive. You can find part-time coding bootcamps. If I have the money, I would go to a coding bootcamp and spend 8 hours. Yeah, but you could, there are part-time programs. A lot of people, when they think coding bootcamps, they think full-time immersive. Do you even self-manage? Do you even lift? You have to be able to self-teach because you're going to need that discipline for the rest of your career. True, but you can learn that as a skill too. All right, let's keep going into it. Build a lot of simple things, not one hard thing. In the same spirit of not overthinking the language or tools you use, you also shouldn't overthink the projects you decide to build. One of my favorite stories about building skills comes from Book of Art, Fear, Observations on the Parallels and Rewards of Art Making. To summarize, there are two groups in a ceramics class. The members of one group have to create a piece every day and submit their best work at the end of them. The members of the other group are allowed to work on a single piece for the entire length of the term to produce a masterpiece. When the term was finished, the best work consistently came from the group that had completed pieces every day. When learning programming, the same principle is true. You learn better and faster when you code and finish small projects frequently. It's still good to work on passion projects that are specifically relevant to you, as mentioned earlier, but it's not good to spend more than a few hours deciding your next project or researching the perfect next step. That's actually pretty legit advice. A lot of people get stuck there when they shouldn't. A lot of people want the perfect project, and that's can really a few hours. Yeah, it's pretty good advice. It's fine to work on something weird or fun for temporary amusement as long as it's something that works. And that you finish it, yeah. With each new project added to our portfolio, so there are 180 different things. So you could find like different like 30 days of JavaScript and just like, or 30 projects and I don't even know. What was the title called? Like 30 days of JavaScript that focused on a project each day. I think it was called 30 days of JavaScript. Not sure. But I like the idea of like just build something weird and fun for temporary amusement. You don't have to be completely random with your project choices either. It's good to try a wide variety of projects so that you expand your ability to handle many different programming scenarios. Yeah. Just don't overthink it. Stop researching and theorizing and start writing software. I agree. Push yourself, but not too much. Many people recommend, no. You can't say like, oh, you know, the trials that you have to go through at like, you know, a few nights, 2 a.m. Like you can't say that and then say, but not too much. Many people recommend writing code every day. For most of us, that means sitting down at the keyboard after dinner and starting on another lesson. If you don't do this and let too many days go by, you start to forget. Yep. The only way to build up the instincts and mental muscle memory is to put in the hours. If you're able to keep up this pace over several weeks, then you'll begin to understand whether coding is a job that you'll be able to stand for more than 40 hours a week. You could argue that coding every day might even be detrimental to your ability to code. That's why I don't recommend 100 days of coding to anyone. 100% agree with this. The brain needs time to rest and process different problems in the background. While you sleep, relax, and work on other things, taking a day off is good for that problem-solving process. But if you lose motivation and can't get back to the lessons, then perhaps it's a sign that coding isn't the right path for you. A lot of people will give you the advice, oh no, you know, you're going to experience some burnout and stuff like that. And maybe it's a little burnout. But no, it's like content creators and, you know, software engineers aren't willing to say this statement. I want to read it again. But if you lose motivation and can't get back to lessons, then perhaps it's a sign that coding isn't the right path for you. And maybe you just add a comma and say at this time. Sometimes coding could be in your future, but it's not the right moment to transition. And maybe treat it a little bit more like a hobby and use it as a de-stressor. I did that for a little while as I was kind of exploring a different career. And I enjoyed coding in that way. And I got to build projects, and I also learned, and it was targeted learning to be able to build the stuff that I wanted to build. And that was fun. It never felt like a chore. It only felt like a chore when I was finally trying to take it seriously and become a professional developer, right? I think it's okay to spend a few months like, hey, I'm just going to do this as a hobby and see how I like it. And I think some people need to loosen up and try that. But that also, with that said, it's like, okay, well, I can't just, I don't know, maybe you're living with your parents. So maybe you're like super young, right? You just graduated high school and you have this leeway. But, if you're older, it's like, I still got to pay the bills. I still got to go to my job. And, staying at your job and learning coding on the side is most people should consider doing that. Way too many people quit their jobs. So, but you should think about this. If this is happening, I would argue if this is happening multiple times, maybe it's not right for you. At least not yet. Taking breaks from coding will help you step back and see if you want to return to coding in a few days, putting that motivation to test. Man, this is good. More aspiring developers need to hear that. But also some burnout can come from like only being able to code like 25 minutes a day and you're frustrated and like you're like, what's the point? You know, like sometimes it is your life situation that you have to tackle and you have to really try to make time for coding. And if you can't make time, maybe it's like building up your finances a little bit more, so now you can like, maybe you're working 50-60 hours a week, and a lot of us have done that, right, in life, and we put a lot of money aside to be able to do that. And you might do that in sprints. You should never be doing that full time. I know people that will do that full time. Some people just want to work, that's fine, but sometimes you have those sprints and you'll put a little money aside so you can trim it back to 40 hours and then put time into your hobbies and stuff like that. Like you have to balance that. Like that's what life is, and just your career in general is figuring out, like, I'm telling you, when you're younger, a lot of people party. A lot of people will, man, they will really abandon, they just won't focus on their career as much as they probably should to set themselves up well into their 30s. Maybe that is what you should do. Maybe that isn't, but a lot of people regret not focusing more on their career in their 20s. Yeah, I don't know. I'm just thinking out loud. Would it be worth it to go into coding even if you don't love it? If my current jobs is warehouse-based work, completely unsatisfied where I am and just want a better life? DCPT, I would argue it could be. Like, you don't have to love it. You have to enjoy it. I would argue that's the benchmark. You should enjoy it. You should enjoy it. If you don't enjoy it, no. And I think a lot of people they hear coding, but they don't hear about all those other tech positions or tech related positions. I would argue maybe there are other positions that are easier to get into that would get you out of your warehouse based work, right? I would argue that coding might not be the career that you should focus on, and that there could be other easier careers to bump up your salary, give you a better work-life balance, give you a better salary. So I think the problem comes when like you don't really enjoy coding, but that's all you're focused on. You haven't considered any other career path. I don't know if you're talking to me about like messaging me or someone else in chat. Part-time boot camp doesn't seem possible to me. It would mean to basically not sleep, to be a bad yeah. Yeah, it's all about figuring out your current situation. I wouldn't go to a coding boot camp if I was starting out, lag, but I think more people actually should consider coding boot camp that are just tossing it out. That's just because it's really easy for me to say I wouldn't go to a coding boot camp. There's a reason why I went to a coding boot camp, and it's because I wasn't getting any calls back. And it's a very hard thing to say. Like when you hear a software engineer say, yeah, I wouldn't go to a coding boot camp. You know, I can learn everything that the coding boot camp taught me. If I had to do it again, I wouldn't have spent the money. Well, of course they're saying that now because like you have confidence that you have a career path, but like a lot of people just don't have that structure or that outline yet, right? And the coding bootcamp can give you that. So I'd be careful about people saying like, yeah, if I had to do it all, and I've done that. I've done a video like if I had to do it all over again, I wouldn't go to a coding bootcamp, and I would take that with a grain of salt. I really would. Barely work 5+ hours as a dev. Full time? Damn. Oh, just coding in general, maybe. Lag, I don't know your specific situation, but what you should do is watch my video of how to choose a coding bootcamp. Go into tons of detail about that. All right, find a buddy and meet in person if possible. This one could be one of the hardest things on this list to do, but it's also the most important. Coding in isolation or with only an online mentor is going to take you just so far. You need someone you can meet with on occasion for 3 main reasons. It'll keep you motivated. You can practice collaboration and idea sharing and see a different perspective. You will learn from each other. Having a friend or mentor who encourages you to keep up with their pace is the best motivation for a self-taught coder. Without that social connection, it's very easy to let your progress fall by the wayside because I 100% agree with this. By the way, when I say in person, I don't mean it literally because of the pandemic. I would argue you still should. We're at a point where you should start considering it. Everyone's going to feel differently, but I would argue we're at a point where you should start considering it. I think a lot of people are like building way too much anxiety and depression just being bottled up in their home. There are many tools for collaboratively working, such as JS Fiddle. If you couple them with a video call, it may be just as effective as meeting in person. Experience in coding projects with others is another key stepping stone for your path forward toward becoming a professional. In most jobs, you'll be working with others, so this experience will help you learn how to navigate those interactions and learn from them. Working in isolation makes it difficult to solve hard problems when there's no one to help introduce you to new ideas. Other humans are sometimes more helpful than Google. True. Sometimes you don't know developers in your local area, like getting involved in Discord and Slack communities and stuff like that can be very helpful. You could find those communities. You don't have to go to a coding bootcamp to get involved in a community like that. Keep trying several strategies to find a partner in coding. Try to encourage some friends or coworkers to join you or look for other people who are likely interested in coding together. Okay, so a lot of advice. I'm going to skip through some of this just because we're at an hour and a half. Focus on a few good resources. There are many free online resources to help you become a programmer without needing to pay for a bootcamp, but that also means there's a lot of noise to sift through. Yep. And this is the part that gets most people. It's not hard to find hundreds of articles that are simply lists to learn to code sites. But your goal is not to spend weeks reading. You need to spend most of your time, in your code editor writing code while using resources mainly for reference. I agree with that. A lot of people just think they don't have enough confidence that they can write any code that's going to do anything. And you build that confidence by trying it and failing, and then trying the next day and failing, and then getting a little supplemental information to try again. And it's getting that process of getting stuck and then looking something up to help you solve that very specific problem. That's usually where people start gaining more confidence. I can do this, right? Go back to the first piece of advice, finding something to code. The resources you choose should match the thing you've decided to build, not the other way around. Your main resource should always be Google and the documentation, the language framework or library you're currently working with. Here's some recommendations for free online resources. And I'll link this article. I'll link this article in the description of the video. Learn how to avoid traps. We'll pause there. Would love to see an updated Full Stack Academy review. Oh, you added it to the Google form. Perfect. Thank you, Wardy. Thank you for all the videos and interviews. It's definitely helpful. Just joined your Discord. Well, welcome, Lag. I'm glad they've been helpful. Thanks for sharing. You guys have a job recommendation that is related to web dev and it could help bootcamp instructor. I'm loving watching your videos. By the way, keep up the good work. Well, thank you, Nelly. Appreciate that. Care to share which bootcamp you're an instructor with? You don't have to. You're welcome either way. I'm just curious. Some instructors like to keep it private, so I completely understand. It's easy to get confused about what bootcamp to go to, but I would try to see actual students and get their opinions. Yeah, true. Not enough people will DM people on LinkedIn. LHL, I'm Googleable. Okay, sounds good. All right. Learn how to avoid traps. One of the biggest challenges for programmers through their careers, but especially for beginners, is getting unstuck. Pushing yourself to find the correct path is the only way to learn, but sometimes you hit a barrier. Your first step anytime you're stuck should be to look at the docs for a language framework library you're working in, then search for your problem in an error message. If the problem is conceptual, then try to articulate that in an online search. Yep. Man, this article is really well laid out. You can tell that this author is very in tune with a lot of the struggles that aspiring developers go through. And I think this author has spent a good amount of time really articulating what that struggle is, how to identify it, and then what to do from there. If you've been stuck in the problem after 30 minutes of troubleshooting and research, try posting a question on Stack Overflow in a form. If you can afford it, check out the Code Mentor if you need serious one-on-one help getting unstuck or some learning advice. Most of your education should be driven by trying to get various lines of code to run and work properly in your project, not by reading through a list of top resources or tutorials. Get good at Googling. Don't try to read everyone's code. Many coding advice resources tell you to try reading great code to learn how to write good code. I know exactly what he's talking about. This is true to an extent, but it's simply a bad idea for beginners learning Ruby on Rails. To trying reading the Ruby on Rails source code in their spare time, it's going to make absolutely no sense and be a waste of your time. It would be as daunting for you as it would be for Little League baseball players to compare themselves to a professional in the major leagues. I agree with that. But I do think looking at well-established open source projects that maybe have a feature do what you're trying to do could be very helpful. I found it helpful to look at, like, I don't think it's a good idea to look at like well-established code bases in the beginning. But once you've gotten a few projects up and you're like, man, I really feel like I'm organizing my app in an unstructured way, or I don't really understand how I'm organizing my app, right? I think looking at other established projects for conventions of architecture, but even like implementations for a specific feature, it can be helpful, but it's also, don't spend a ton of time doing that because it can definitely be daunting. You can get lost, and at a certain point, like I think a lot of conventions will come just from like, I guess building, maybe like you've built a few React applications and then your fourth application, it's like, man, I have a lot of components. I have like 20, 30 components here. I find it taking a little bit more time to find the right component. I don't even know like how it's nested, right? I don't even understand what components are even nested, what are shared, and what components they're shared with. Like, I feel like my app needs to be a little bit more organized, but how do people tackle this problem? And I would argue like looking at a larger code base can probably be more daunting. You might find that answer, but sometimes it's just looking up an article of someone describing why they choose a certain architecture and looking, oh, okay, they actually mentioned like they had, 30, 40 components and they didn't really understand the nesting of those components. What, like the dependencies, right? And so this is how they solved it. Okay, this is solving my problem I have right now. So it's experiencing that problem and building a more complex application, realizing there's a better way to do it, and then using that as a stepping stone into, okay, now is the right time to look up better conventions. But I would argue a lot of people look up conventions too quickly. I think conventions are not as helpful as you think they are, and it's okay to write bad code in the beginning. It's definitely okay to write bad code. It just needs to work. Ooh, better option is taking simple templates for certain frameworks that you're already familiar with. Yeah. Blog templates, one of those rather than building a blog from scratch. Depends on where you are. I don't know. When I was going through Full Stack Academy, I had a lot of fun. I built a blog on the side. That's what I used to reinforce a lot of what I was learning. That's how a lot of programmers start. They don't know the internals of various services and applications, but the API is built so well that services developers that it's much easier for a junior programmer to work with those by modifying data fields. In the beginning, maybe. A lot of junior programmers are going to start their careers by working with and learning existing code bases while hunting for bugs. So reading others' code is a necessary skill, but it's important that you don't jump into code that's way over your head. Yeah, you can understand 60 to 70% of the code you're looking at and how various files communicate and work together. Then it might be worth exploring if you understand 60 to 70%. I think it's pretty based. Don't waste time preparing for puzzle-based coding interviews. I've written extensively about the problems with whiteboard and puzzle-based interviews for developers. As a beginner, all you need to know is that a lot of companies, including Google, have bad interviewing practices, and you shouldn't spend much time teaching yourself how to pass these in practical exams. I disagree with this. This extends outside of Google. I 100% disagree, but let's see what he has to say. When you finally reach the stage where you have enough projects, and hopefully some freelancers do, to put on your resume, you should at least do some research into how developer interviews are conducted, but don't go out and buy any resource solely focused on helping you pass a programming interview test. There are plenty of companies that don't do gotcha style interviews. Okay. And those are ones you should gravitate toward. If a company can't spare a technical person to run your interview to ask brain teaser questions that are unrelated to what you'll be doing in your daily work, then you probably don't want to work for that company anyways. I've seen this advice from a few different programmers. This is bad advice, and here's why. He's explaining an ideal scenario of like, he's explaining an ideal scenario of like, probably he prefers project-based. He thinks project-based interviews are the best kind of interviews, and they kind of are for applicants, but that's not realistic. This market is extremely oversaturated. You're getting hundreds of people applying for the same entry-level position, and hiring managers are going to make that more efficient. It does not mean it's a bad sign of like it's a red flag of what it's like to work at a culture, or what the culture is like and what it's like to work at a company. That's not a red flag to that. And so I think he's kind of like trying to point, like, if they have bad interviewing practices, which he kind of claims, probably more focused on like algorithm type challenges as bad interviewing practices. I don't agree with that, right? You're going to get some basic, and even like when we did it with Dan did a mock interview for a junior position, entry level position. And he had some algorithm type questions that I would commonly see. I wouldn't say those specific problems were what I would commonly see with job interviews, but the level that he asked them in were common. Like the skill level matched up to what I've heard and seen in different interviews at the entry level. You're going to get those type of questions. This idea that like, just look for the ideal interview, like, aspiring developers are struggling so much to even get a call back, and you're going to tell developers to like, just, like, put that interview aside. It's not worth it, right? Don't prepare for it. It's like, I'm telling you, there are a lot of positions that are going to test you on this kind of knowledge, and you should, like, I think project work should trump anything. I agree with that. And I think that's something that he's emphasizing, but you're going to hit these interviews. They're going to happen. And I think you're going to be better at tackling these algorithm type questions if you really have a solid understanding of fundamentals, right? And I think that can be like, if you're struggling to tackle basic algorithms, and you don't even know that you're supposed to use like even just a loop to solve this problem, you probably just don't understand programming fundamentals as much as you should. And so maybe it means going back into those fundamentals, but spending extra time with data structures and algorithms on the side, just a little bit. Project work should always take priority at the entry level, but on the side, just a little bit, is going to be very beneficial. People don't have the luxury that, like, it's a buyer's market for the employers, not the employees. So this idea, you're going to be passing up so many good companies to work for just because you're way too idealistic. And I think you have a gripe against interview practices, and that's what it feels like. But I think you're giving really bad advice for aspiring developers that will probably encounter these problems. And it does not mean the company is a bad company to work for. It means that they're trying to be more efficient with their hiring process. And again, hiring managers are very, very often overworked. They're putting in extra hours, and to be able to then hire for a new position, this is unrealistic to tell people this. I think it's really, really bad advice to give people. I wouldn't take this. I do not think this is based. I agree with most of this article, but I think this is horrible advice. Now, what you shouldn't prepare for is trying to do as many algorithm type questions. So like, you hope that an employer is going to ask you that very specific question. But I mean, even just like tackling a question, a problem where a linked list is the best data structure to use in that instance, that's phenomenal. So now if you have a problem that kind of starts introducing, like, they want this certain result with the data, it makes the most sense to store that in a linked list specifically and be able to just navigate through that and manipulate it, edit it, retrieve that data. Like, it just makes sense to use a linked list based on, sometimes it's a little bit more, you'll change the data structure specifically because the recall needs to be very, very fast. But sometimes it's just like the data structure needs to be able to store tons of like in-depth nested data and like it depends on the problem and how, like, the solution that they're, well, it depends on the problem that you're trying to solve for, right? But if you solve the problem with a linked list, you'll more easily be able to identify other problems where it's like, oh, you know what, this kind of sounds familiar to the problem I solved with that linked list. I think a linked list would be good here. And then if you dive further into data structures, you can start identifying those problems a little bit more. I think it's incredibly helpful to dive into, and I think this is where this kind of advice of like, yeah, just focused on only companies that will interview in a certain way, I think is horrible advice. And I think you're just going to be looking, I mean, you can do this, but I think you're going to be looking for a job for much longer than what's needed. Than if you just tackle this a little bit each day. You don't have to dive super deep into it very quickly, but tackle this just a little bit each day. Even just spent an entire week on a linked list and problems that would utilize a linked list. I think maybe even 2 weeks, you're just doing that on the side. I think it could be very, very beneficial. I think this person is way too idealistic and does not truly understand some of the challenges that aspiring developers are going to, even trying to get that call back. Who did the shameless plug? Wardy? Yeah, guys, please call out if anyone's like advertising in my chat, or even like if they're requesting a review. Like, I appreciate you sharing. Hey, I have a link in the description. The things that I'm like constantly repeating, feel free to type in chat so I don't have to repeat myself for like the 12th time. I do appreciate that. Yeah, and I will post a link. The link will be in the description. I don't think it's in the description now, but right after this live stream, I'll put it in there. Found it with Google. Yeah, you could just look. I mean, you could just type this in too for now. A fun exercise of what's the fastest way to find this article without copying the URL from the screen share. I love it. That's a good practice for Google. I love it. Am I self-taught? No, about 1.5 years I was self-taught. Then I went to Full Stack Academy. And Thomas, I haven't reviewed that, but if you want to request a review on that, you are more than welcome to. The link is in the description. There's a form link. The author is a freelancer, so he doesn't interview, I suppose. Yeah. But I've also seen this from even people that I've had on my podcast, this kind of advice. I just think this advice is way too idealistic, and I think people don't realize the impact that it has. Because a lot of people get tripped up with this, and they will get tested with it in interviews, and I don't really care what you think about that in the interview. It's just probably going to happen much less often for front-end positions, but you'll still get tested with it. It can still be a good company to work for. They're just trying to be more efficient with their hiring process, and that's not necessarily a bad indicator of what it's like to work for them. It's just they're probably getting a lot. They might even just get tons of applications because it's a good company to work for. I said I'm a bootcamp instructor. No, I don't think it was you. Oh yeah, no, oh, that's what it was. Nubin was calling. Yeah, no. I appreciate that, Nubin, but I did ask Nally where he was from. Good point. All right. Any plans on having more mock interviews on your channel? Yeah, potential. I want to space it out because like the people that I invite on, it takes a while to set up that mock interview. And I don't want to ask too much to people that are willing to do that. So I usually try to space them out. All right. Whew. All right, we're gonna rush through the end of this, and then we'll wrap it up. Okay, explore low code options. Lately, so-called low code and no code tools have cropped up. Some even use names such as robotic process automation, even though there are no anthropometric droids in sight. This is generally a good trend because these tools are useful at solving some problems. They can make it simple to say create a dashboard with real-time graphs that look good and impress the boss. The names, though, are not entirely accurate. Most of the tools replace syntactic wrangling of text files with a series of forms to fill out and push and buttons to push. You'll often need to think like a programmer about data structures and workflows, even though you'll just be clicking with a mouse. These can be good places to start or to begin learning what computers can do. They can offer the chance to take steps that can be easier to understand than text-based languages, and sometimes mastering a low-code tool is all you need to do to solve your needs or your company's. So that's interesting. I very rarely hear people recommend low-code tools to essentially teach like programming concepts and understanding like what computers can do, what are the possibilities. It's an interesting perspective. I don't know if I agree or disagree with it, but it's interesting. You don't have to be a developer to find a rewarding career in tech. Yes. If you take the advice I've given in the previous sections and you still can't find a way to break into professional coding, it may be time to take a step back and see whether there are alternative paths to a rewarding career in tech that utilize specific strengths. If you're not interested enough in programming to code 20 hours a week in your free time, maybe there are other things you enjoy more than map onto one of the many roles found in tech companies. We'll just go over them. Product manager, QA professional, build release engineer, system administrator, DevOps, site reliability, tech sales, tech marketer, tech writer, tech journalist, business analyst, programming analyst, technical support professional, technical account manager, community development professional. Yeah. Yes. Try searching for some of these titles and see what's involved. Building some experience in a field that you can explore in your current job is one of the best approaches you can take toward career progression. Just remember that coding isn't your only path to a good career, but also remember that a bit of coding ability can boost your earning potential past other candidates in your chosen field, and that ability can also be a foot in the door of coding tools industry. The story is revised, updated version of okay, graduated from an online. Oh, he did graduate from an online coding bootcamp. Turned out that coding wasn't the right path for him, and he turned his discovery into some of the lessons included here. Wow. Okay. That's why he's so in tune with the struggles of a developer. It sounds like he realized, I bet you he went through a lot of these struggles, and he was really good at analyzing just his own habits and his struggles and articulating that into identifying what many other students probably can relate to. And I'm sure he's talked to other developers about this. So it doesn't sound like he really went the professional developer route. I mentioned he was a freelancer. This is very, very in-depth. He's very aware of a lot of the needs of aspiring developers. I think, Peter Weiner, again, I will link this in the description. I think you did an excellent job at identifying, a lot of this. And you did a really good job at spelling out specific timelines and specific number of hours of like where you would draw that line in the sand to question, like, is this for me? And even just that idea of like, if you take some time off, you can't get back into it. I would argue the caveat is that should happen a few times. Sometimes it's just your life situation and you need to be able to identify that. But like, I think he did a really good job. I think he's very self-aware, and he probably focuses a lot on psychology and just people in general. Now, I want to say this, and feel free to share your thoughts of what you thought about the article in chat, because I think this is a really interesting one. I wanted to, it's going to be a full 2-hour live stream. So I appreciate people hanging in there till the end, because I know a very long live stream. I'm sure I've had some people drop off, but he is very biased towards coding bootcamps, very biased. I would argue more so than me, which is hard to do. I mean, it's, I don't know. I think to eliminate some of that bias, where I would like fully agree with them is if he dove into a lot of the positive things that you should look for in a coding bootcamp. He talked a lot about like what you should look for if you think that you are interested in coding, and how to verify that, how to validate that, and how to get through the entire process without like completely tearing your hair out, right? And you can really empathize with you know, like looking at, okay, he came from a coding bootcamp, he didn't become a developer. It feels like he went through some of this, right? You can empathize with that. I'm sure a lot of you can. But I would have loved to hear, okay, these are the things that you are critical of a coding bootcamp. So what's your advice on people where a coding bootcamp might be right for them, right? I don't think he really dove heavily into that. And I think there's but he's very clear about that from the beginning. Coding bootcamps won't make you a developer. And this is where I disagree. They 100% can. They 100% can. So we know he's biased. And I think he's giving self-taught developers some encouragement, but he's also being very realistic with self-taught developers, which is very rare. Someone with this kind of title, really against coding bootcamps, usually will make the self-taught developer path shining. It's like the perfect path to do. And man, he was critical at the self-taught developer path. I don't think he dove into any stats that like really emphasized how many self-taught developers don't make it as self-taught developers and eventually go into coding bootcamps. And I think him talking about even just like, him providing some sort of stats to like really back up the self-taught path would be helpful. And it's okay. Like, 5-10% of people that go down the self-taught path become a self-taught developer. He did a really good job outlining of like what you should be looking for before you invest all this damn time into the self-taught path. But I think a lot of stats would show that you should have more consideration that coding bootcamps actually are the right choice for a lot of people, and a lot of people will fail with the self-taught path. And what does that look like? What are the questions you should ask admissions? What are the hard-hitting questions, right? Form a lot of the critiques that you have with the coding bootcamp into questions of what you should be asking admissions to make sure it's the right coding bootcamp for you, because it gives a very generic feel that just the coding bootcamp industry is just full of lies, and it is. But you need to dive deeper into that. Like, what are the lies? What coding bootcamps are telling these lies? And what coding bootcamps are being truthful and actually landing developers positions? What are some of the patterns of coding bootcamps that are deceiving? Like, because he really emphasized a lot of coding bootcamps. He called out a few coding bootcamps, I think, but he emphasized like, here's what they're doing wrong. But what are some of the patterns of the coding bootcamps where you can expand that? So like he called out maybe a few coding bootcamps and then like look for these patterns in other coding bootcamps to really try to avoid that. But I don't think he had that intention. I think he just wanted to shit on the coding bootcamp industry. And for good reason. I think this is a really valuable, effective article, but I think I would disagree on some of these, on his huge bias. I would want to challenge him on that bias to say, okay, now talk about the people that actually would be successful at the coding bootcamp, and what are those successful coding bootcamps? What do they look like? But either way, it's a bias article. He's upfront. He's clear from the beginning. I thought it was an amazing article. I thought he did a really good job. He's very insightful. He's very self-aware. He's very aware of the industry. I thought this was a really good article. Wardy, if you'd like me to review any program, feel free to go to the form link in the description and submit that review request. Kind of enjoy data and algos. System administrator seems kind of cool. Aren't those brain teaser questions just about the thought process rather than getting the answers right? Usually. I mean, sometimes it is about getting the answers right. Sometimes it is, but the thought process is definitely something that is analyzed in it. Yes, Nickel, 100% agree. And that thought process is very helpful. It's very helpful at trying to analyze that in a programmer. That's why I think those questions are actually effective. You think low code, no code is going to be the future of web development? Jeremy, I did an entire live stream about it. There are going to be positions that are replaced with the low code, no code movement, as there already have been. But it's not going to replace being a programmer. It's just essentially going to, in some parts of programming, make it a little bit more specialized, or a lot of the programmers that are going to do very well and keep their programming jobs are going to be ones that didn't just become stagnant in their position building, landing pages, right? You can easily be replaced. If all you're building is landing pages, there's no reason to have you, hire you as a developer. There's no reason. There are tools to be able to do that. So it depends on, you got to go into depth with your knowledge, and you're going to be just fine with web development in the next 5 to 10 years. At least 5. I don't think I've really looked into the next 10 years. Definitely critical on coding boot camps, yeah. Most people I've worked with who went to boot camp were also self-taught. I have a college degree, but I was self-taught prior. I don't think it's either or. Yeah, a lot of people will combine it. I did. A lot of other people. And I think you should combine. And that's actually a mistake. You shouldn't just dive into a coding boot camp. I even in my one-on-ones, I don't think I've ever encountered anyone where I'm like, yeah, just dive into a coding boot camp. You don't know anything, just dive in head first. Like, I've never recommended that. I think you should be self-taught, at least to explore it a bit. I think the article has valid points, but as you said, it's a bit biased. I'd take it with a bowl of salt or two. Yeah. That's how I'm looking at this article. I just don't think anyone should expect to go to a coding bootcamp and get a job, which they often advertise, unfortunately, and see it as a step. See it as a step in your journey. I would argue that you can expect to get a job fairly quickly after a coding bootcamp if, with a big caveat, I think most people that do that spent at least 3 months heavily into the self-taught path, at least 3 months, preferably 6 months. And they go into a coding bootcamp, and it's not just like knowledge that's floating and they haven't applied it or implemented it. Like, they're able to pick up that knowledge and reinforce it very quickly because they really went in with a solid foundation. If you can go into a coding bootcamp with a self-taught history, I think you can get a job very quickly. And I think most of the people that haven't had prior experience as a developer, that at least have gone the self-taught route and built some projects of their own and learned the fundamentals, I think they're the people that usually get those jobs very quickly after coding bootcamp. But yeah, like you said, I mean, it's heavily advertised that they're going to get the job, and it is misleading for the average developer. So I think it's important to recognize, like, who are those successful people? What are their histories? What are their backgrounds? Did they spend a little extra time with that self-taught journey beforehand? That's really important to consider. Yeah, definitely a helpful article. I feel like the article is right about a lot, but it has a tone of being a Debbie Downer about trying to become a software engineer, which I don't like. I know a lot of places overhype becoming coder, but it can be done, has been done, and will continue to be done. So I feel like the tone could have been a little bit more optimistic. Let me think about that. So that's the trick. And I would argue there are definitely going to be people that unsubscribe from my channel because I am so critical about should you become a developer. I guarantee you there have been people that have unsubscribed from my channel with that. And when I can tell you my stance, and I wonder if he's taken this stance. My stance on being critical of the software engineering industry is I am a huge person to play devil's advocate. Even the way I interact with some of you, you know, when I say like that's bullshit or like don't take that personally. Like the people that stay in my live chat, they've learned not to take that personally. And I have tons of respect for you guys. I really do. But I'm very blunt in when I say that kind of stuff because I think sometimes it triggers an interesting conversation and an interaction. But I think developers are I see so many programs and marketing materials and coding boot camps and content creators that get tons of likes that just sell this dreamy version of becoming a developer. And I think the worst thing that you can do going into this industry is having unrealistic expectations. It's the unrealistic expectations that I think really prevents developers from building a strong mindset. You should not become a developer and depend on motivation. Motivation is the last thing that will, I mean, like that, it's not the last thing, but that motivation will fade so many times when becoming a developer. So you need more substance. You need something stronger. You need to build very strong habits of becoming a developer and not have this dreamy, these dreamy, unrealistic expectations of how easy it's going to be or that this developer position is going to be amazing. It's the unrealistic expectations that I think prevent most people from becoming a developer. And so what I think this author is doing is really setting those expectations up accurately. And I would argue he's done a better job than I probably have of identifying very particular things to look out for. I don't know. Sometimes I just forget things that I say like 6 months ago. Maybe I provide good advice. I don't know. But like he's done a really good job at diving into individual situations that you can relate to help identify if this is the path for you. And I think more often than not, people should be asking that and they don't. And so he probably is aware of all these other marketing things that, like, you know, he probably might even remember Obama saying everyone should learn to code, and, like, you know, spurring kind of a big movement with that. And, like, he probably is also identifying like this big great resignation of everyone quitting and moving into tech. And it's like he's seeing this market probably become very, very oversaturated and be like, most of you, you're not going to be breaking in. You know, a lot of you went into this with really unrealistic expectations. So I would argue he's doing a very, very good job of playing devil's advocate against this idea. I would even argue most of this article isn't really about, like, should you go to a coding bootcamp? I would argue like that this article doesn't answer that question accurately, but the question it does answer accurately is, should you become a programmer? And I think even if it doesn't provide you the motivation that you're hoping for, if this article discourages you from becoming a developer, you were never meant to become a developer in the first place. Like, this article actually held your hand big time. I would argue I'm more critical. If this article discouraged you from becoming a developer, maybe it's not meant for you. And I guarantee you, I'm probably going to get people that unsubscribe from my live stream just because I said that. I don't really care. But like, if you're in that mind space of becoming a developer, then you're probably thinking about, like, this probably isn't for you in the first place. And we might have even just saved you like years worth of coding and learning, right? To explore something different. But if you have the mindset of like, man, this is going to be hard, kind of feeling discouraged a little bit, but like, you know, like, I really want to do this, right? That is a powerful mindset. If you take this article and you get a little bit discouraged, you're like, you know what, but I do enjoy coding. You know, I'm going to make this work. That's powerful. That is such a powerful way to start off becoming a developer, because you've shown that you don't depend on this fleeting motivation to get you all the way through. You're showing me that you have some sort of commitment into this profession that, you know, this kind of thing won't phase you. It'll give you realistic expectations, but it won't phase you. And you're going to keep pushing forward. If that's the mindset that you have, then maybe coding is for you, right? And so I would argue, reading this article, you need to analyze that about yourself. I think these articles are really, really helpful because there's so many marketing materials and content creators that just keep putting this idea on a pedestal, and it gets likes, it gets traction in the algorithm. It does. That's how I see this article. The reality check hits hard. Yeah, it should. You believe that going to a coding bootcamp is not a benefit in getting a job after? It usually speeds up the process. That's one of the main benefits. Usually, not always. It's refreshing to hear a different opinion on coding other than coding is sunshine and rainbows. I mean, yeah, it's true. Realistic goals, yeah. I certainly think there's a hype about being a programmer without showing the full picture of the requirements it takes to start maintaining a path, yeah. Most times you have to have some knowledge before going into a bootcamp, or you just won't make it without being proficient. Afterwards, true. They just want that 6-figure tech job, but only want to put in 3-figure effort. Yep, chatter, yep. Guess it's the consequence of how polarized the market has become. And that's what it is. It's a consequence, and that's a really good way to look at it. You probably described it better than I am. It's because I mentioned the idea of like he's kind of playing devil's advocate. I think I said that in the right way, right? And it's to combat all like the dreamy, unrealistic marketing that they're promoting to people. And you have to remember, if someone has put up an ad, they are making a profit, they are making money. There's nothing wrong with that. I am a capitalist, and I will get people to unsubscribe just because I've said that. I don't care. I can truly respect a company trying to make money, but I can also respect, like, when I, buy into a program, I'm going to make damn sure it's going to provide tons of value for me. I'm going to get way more value in return of what I pay for that. And if I'm not, there's no way in hell I am giving a company my money. But you have to understand, they're companies at the end of the day, and they're the ones that can afford pushing out all of these ads, and selling this dreamy vision of becoming a software engineer. It's easy and anyone could do it. True. No, it's not easy. I don't agree with that. Oh, you're saying versus it's hard work. Okay, I should have finished reading that. A lot of people don't make it, and you will never stop learning. That's true. Do I work full-time for a tech company? I do not. I quit my full-time position, full stack engineer 2 years ago to start the YouTube channel and mentor a lot of people. Love the realism here. I'm glad it's been helpful. So yeah, look at it, like look at this article as like a test. Look at it as a test. And if you find that, man, like if you truly are thinking like coding probably isn't for me, maybe it isn't. Like I know it's not advice a lot of people want to hear, but like if this article sways you of becoming a programmer, I'm telling you, it sounds like you're already flighty about it. Maybe it's not for you. But again, the people that look at this article, it's okay to get discouraged from it. I think that's normal. And I think you have to understand, like, he was really critical, and you might need to take a few days to think about, like, you know, think about this article a bit. But if you look at this article and again, you're like, you know what, this is really difficult. He's critical. It discouraged me a bit, right? But you take a few days, you're like, dude, I want to do this. I enjoy coding. Then you can become a developer. You 100% can. But it's really just understanding, it's like, you know, maybe another tech position can make up your lifestyle. Maybe it can make your life better. I don't know. I think he did a really good job. He gave a lot of things to think about. This is a good article. Biased. I don't really care about the question he answered with this, but I care more about the question of should you become a developer? I think that was really accurate and how to become a developer. That's it. It's been over 2 hours. I don't know if this has been our longest live stream, but I appreciate you guys being here, especially those that have been here for a long time. And yeah, if you missed a lot of it, you'll be able to watch the past broadcast, but we will be live Wednesday, 1:30 Central Time on Friday. And again, I just got a new Patreon as well. So thank you so much for the support on Patreon, and being a YouTube member goes a long way. The money goes directly towards my bills. And again, if you are a patron, not enough people take advantage of this, but YouTube members and patrons, we do like a live Q&A. It's private. It's not like this public thing. It's a little bit more personal. We get on video and we hop on, we help people, but we just did that, but we'll do one again during the next month. So make sure you join if you're a Patreon or YouTube member, make sure you join the Discord, connect your account, and you should get access to the private channel. You'll be able to see like early releases of my podcasts and stuff like that. All right, that's it. Glad you guys had fun with it. I had fun with this article. It was a good one. I'll link it in the description. But thank you for being here. Good luck on all of your projects, and happy coding, everyone. Take care.